Hello, Professor Rees. Today I want to present you the topic culture dimensions of Hofstede and Schwarz, and therefore here you can see my agenda. I will start with an introduction of Gerhard Hofstede and describe his culture dimensions, continue with Shalom Schwarz and his culture dimensions, show you the results of both dimensions, and continue with Trompenair and also his cultural dimensions, as well as with Hall and his cultural factors. And lastly, I want to show you my references. So first of all, as I said, I will start with Hofstede and his cultural dimensions from 1980. So first of all, the short introduction of himself. Gerhard Hofstede was born in October the 2nd in 1928 in the Netherlands, and he is a Dutch social psychologist and currently professor emeritus of organizational anthropology and international management in the Maastricht University. And he was a former employee of IBM, which is also very important because he made his survey there to find out the different culture dimensions. He is describing culture as the collective programming of the mind that distinguishes the members of one group or category of people from others. And in 1980, he published his book, Cultures, Consequences, International Differences in Work-Related Values. Now I will start with the first culture dimension of Hofstede, which is power distance, and it is described as expecting and accepting unequal distribution of power within an organization or institution. And for instance, this is the power distance of a boss and his or her subordinate. So to call the relationship between both. And below you can see a chart which describes the power distance by country. This is the power distance index, and here you can see clear that, for example, Germany or Denmark has a very low power distance in comparison to Russia and India. They have a very high power distance. Yeah, in the second culture dimension, you can see individualism versus collectivism. While individualism or individuals are expected to take care of only themselves and maybe also their immediate family, collectivistic cultures emphasis on belonging to a group, being loyal to them, and being also a good member of a group. Examples of individualistic cultures are the US, France, or Germany, and collectivistic cultures are the Brazil, Philippines, and Greece. The third cultural dimension, masculinity versus femininity, describes different values countries or people have. In masculine cultures, dominant values are performance, earnings, heroism, or assertiveness, while feminine cultures' values are cooperativeness, modesty, security, etc. Feminine cultures are Norway, Thailand, and Sweden, while masculine cultures are the Japan, Mexico, and Austria. The culture dimension uncertainty avoidance describe the degree of feeling comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity. And as you see in the chart below, Belgium, Greece, Poland, or Russia have a very high uncertainty avoidance, which means that they are very uncomfortable with some situation that they cannot really forecast, while China, India, or the UK are very comfortable with it. Hofstede also focused on long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. Long-term oriented cultures focus their efforts on the future. These are, for example, China, India, or the Brazil, while people or cultures that are short-term oriented, they focus rather on the present. And these countries are, for example, the US, the UK, and Nigeria. The last culture dimension, indulgence versus restraint, describe different societies with different directions to their life. This means that indulgence, for example, describes a society that believes in controlling of their own life and emotions by enjoying life and just having fun. These are countries like Canada, Argentina, and Saudi Arabia, while restrained cultures describe as a society that suppresses gratification of needs and regulates it by means of strict social norms. These countries are, as you can maybe imagine, China, Russia, and Tanzania. Yeah, and all in all, there are also some criticism of Hofstede's work. Schwartz, for example, said that it is a non-exhaustive approach. It is not very covering everything. He just asked employees from IBM, so one company and one type of employees with 50 different nations. And he asked about 116,000 employees. And furthermore, the results are time dependent. So, from the end of the 20th century, and some people also ask themselves whether culture can be defined. And because of multiculturalism in a country, it is difficult to verify his culture dimensions. On the other side, I want to now focus on Schwartz and his culture dimensions, and additionally his values that he found out, because he said Hoff says culture dimensions are not enough, it is not including everything, and his approach from 1994 shows more values or data. As I already did by Hofstede, I want to shortly introduce Shalom Schwartz. He was born in 1940 in the United States and is an American Israeli social psychologist and intercultural scientist. He was a former professor of sociology in the University of Wisconsin in the US and is currently professor emeritus of psychology in the Hebrew University. As I already said, Schwartz has also developed his culture dimensions. The first one is embeddedness versus autonomy, and embeddedness describe people that are viewed as entities embedded in the collectivity and emphasizes maintaining the status quo and group solidarity and tradition, while autonomy describes people who are obviously autonomous, bounded entities, and their own preferences, feelings, ideas, and abilities are in the foreground. Autonomy is also divided into two parts: intellectual and affective autonomy. Intellectual autonomy describes the own ideas and intellectual directions that are independently, while affective autonomy describes the encouragement of individuals to pursue effectively positive experience for themselves. The second culture dimension, hierarchy versus egalitarianism, is similar to Hofstede's culture dimension, and these describes a hierarchy that is unequal distribution of power, roles, and resources, while egalitarianism describes the recognition of one another as moral equals who share basic interests as human beings, and they are expected to act for the benefits of others as a matter of choice. Yeah, the third culture dimension is mastery versus harmony. In the mastery, the people encourages active self-assertion in order to master, direct, and change the natural and social environment to attain group or personal goals. While in harmony, people emphasizes as adapting to the world and accepting it as it is, and with no willing to change it, direct, or exploit it. Yeah, because Schwartz had the opinion that Hofstede's culture dimensions were not really completed or enough for describing the dimension or the values of cultures. He developed different cultural values and also set a link to the cultural dimensions, which I told you before. So, cultural values are power with the characteristics of authority, social power, and social stimulation, with the link which refers to hierarchy. Furthermore, the achievement, which describes skills, success, and intelligence, which refer to mastery. And thirdly, there is the hedonism, where the characteristic is to enjoying life, and this would rather lead to autonomy and clear the effect of autonomy. Furthermore, stimulation, which describes the need of a variety in life, which also refers to effective autonomy. Furthermore, the another value is the self-direction with the characteristics creativity and freedom, which refers on the other side to intellectual autonomy, and universalism with the characteristics of wisdom, equality, social fairness. While equality refers to egalitarianism, wisdom and social fairness is markable to embeddedness. The cultural value benevolence shows the links to loyalty and honesty with the respect to egalitarianism. On the other side, there is a conformity with the characteristics self-discipline, politeness, which refers to embeddedness. Yeah, the last two values. Tradition, of course, means that people or culture respecting these traditions, which refer to embeddedness. And lastly, the security, that people have a sense of belonging to a culture, to a group, whatever, and also to have a social security, which also refer to the dimension embeddedness. And as you can see, Schwartz dimensions and additionally his values are more detailed than these of Hofstede and also refer not only to the working life but also in the normal environment of people. So after introducing you the culture dimensions of Hofstede as well as the culture dimensions and values of Schwartz, I want to add some results and I told also some of them before, but I want to sum up the final results. So as you can obviously see, that is that Schwartz's work is similar to that of Hofstede. For example, the case of the hierarchy and the power distance. And Schwartz's values include elements of culture that are not captured by Hofstede's values. Furthermore, Schwartz's culture values capture more aspects of culture. And obviously, the results of Schwartz's model are more recent. And the problem is that because of modernization, both dimensions cannot be verified for 100% because values obviously are also changing. And additionally, as I already said, the dimensions of Schwartz are more useful for non-work issues because, as you heard before, Hofstede asked the employees of IBM, and this was rather related to business life. Okay, beside of the culture dimensions of Schwartz and Hofstede, I want to introduce you also some other intercultural frameworks. For example, that of entrepreneurs and Hall. First of all, I want to shortly introduce both researcher. Entrepreneurs is a Dutch French social scientist of intercultural communication and a former student of Hofstede. This means he was rather inspired of Hofstede. On the right side, you can see Hall. He was an US American anthropologist and a cross cultural researcher, and his concepts include proxemics, monochronic and polychronic, and high context and low context. Now I want to describe you the culture dimensions of Trumpeneers in 1993. The cultural dimension, universalism versus particularism, shows the following. Universalism describes people who are setting importance on laws, rules, values, and obligations. They try to deal fairly with people based on these rules, and relationship comes always after that rules. And in particularistic cultures, it always depends, and it is a opposite, so to say, that they are according differently into circumstances. Universalism described countries like Germany and the US, while particularism is defined in countries like China and Russia. The next one describes individualism versus collectivism. This is also similar to the of Hofstede. And in individualistic cultures, as I said before, it is important to consider always of themselves and the relatives, while collectivistic cultures also care about other people or groups and stay loyal to these groups. Individualistic cultures are, for example, Canada or Switzerland, while collectivistic cultures are, for example, Brazil and Japan. On the other side, there is another dimension called neutral and affective, or also emotional. In neutral cultures, it is better to hide their emotions. So people make great effort to control their emotions, and they don't reveal what they are thinking or how they are feeling. While in affective or emotional situations or cultures, people want to find ways to show their emotions in every situation, and it is also accepted to show the emotions. Yeah, so neutral countries are, for example, the United Kingdom and Sweden, and effective countries are France or Italy. Yeah, the next culture dimension, achievement and description, means that people on the side of achievement believe that you are what you do and what you are doing, and these culture value performance no matter who you are. And on the other side, the ascription describes people that believes in you, which are valued for power, title, and the positions, and therefore these roles define also the behavior. So, achievement countries are, for example, New Zealand and Canada, and ascription countries are, for example, Saudi Arabia and the Japan. Yeah, in specific cultures, people can separate work and personal life. The result is that they can work together without having a very good relationship, and it does not have any impact on work objectives and etc. In diffuse cultures, people see an overlap between both sides, and they believe that good relationship is essential to meeting business objectives and yeah, the relationships with others, and they spend also time outside the work hours with their colleagues and yeah, clients. And some examples of specific cultures are Switzerland and Netherlands, and diffuse cultures are Spain or Argentina, for example. Yeah, the next culture dimension, sequential versus synchronic, is focused on time, while sequential means that people like happenings to in order. This means that they value punctuality, planning, which means strict planning, and staying always on schedule. In this culture, time is money, so to say, and yeah, people are very angry if any schedule is not going on as planned. While synchronic time refer to people that or who see the past, present, and future as interwoven periods. These means that they are not really caring on punctuality. They think that they have time, and yeah, they see plans, for example, as very flexible. Sequential countries are as obviously Germany or the UK, and synchronic countries are Mexico or Argentina, for example. The last culture dimension, inner directed or internal direction or outer directed, which also can be said as outer direction, describes the environment towards the human being. In internal direction, people believe that they can control nature and their environment to achieve some goals. And these includes that the way of working with teams and within an organization, while outer direction describes that people are believing that nature or the specific environment that they controls them, and they have to work with the environment to achieve these goals. This is yeah, the idea in mind, and hereby people often need reassurance that they are doing a good job. And examples for inner directed cultures are New Zealand or the US, for example, and outer directed countries are China or Russia. Now I want to also focus on Holt's cultural dimensions in 1976 that he has identified. So, first of all, high context versus low context. High context describes or set values on social trust, as well as personal relationships and goodwill. Agreements often are based on trust, and negotiations are slow and ritualistic. And examples for high context cultures are China, Korea, Japan, or Vietnam. And on the other side, low context cultures idea is that business comes first, so before relationships, and values are expertise and performance. Agreements are based on legalistic contracts, and negotiations have to be as efficient as possible. These low context cultures are, for example, Germany, Switzerland, North America, and so on. And the second culture dimension is monochronic time versus polychronic time. This is also similar to that of Trompeneer, as he considered also time. Monochronic time means that doing one thing at one time or at a time, and thereby planning and scheduling is very important. That have to be careful, planned, and yeah, the discipline to the time management is also very important, which led also to low context cultures, as you can see above again, like Germany. On the other side, polychronic time means that doing many things at a time, and thereby human interaction is valued um, a lot, as well as relationships that comes first. And this, on the other side, leads again to high context cultures like Mexico, for example. Lastly, the space is also a criteria by identifying cultural dimensions. High territoriality means that people greater concern for ownership, so they like to marking their territory. And the word mine to material things is also always common. And yeah, an example for high territoriality is again Germany, because they want to have space. If you can see maybe business partners walking across yeah, along the street, you can see the different spaces or distance between them. On the other side, low territoriality means that people gave less ownership of space, less importance of boundaries, and for them, the importance of ownership of material things is also less. This refers again to high context cultures, and an example for that is, as you can see, maybe on the right, there is a quarrel. It's in India, and there no space between the people, which is common there. And high territoriality means also low context, and low territoriality means also high context. Yeah, last but not least, I want to show you the last slide, which consists of understanding different cultures with 3 different nationalities. The Chinese girl, for example, on the left, says that it is impolite to open gifts when received, or yeah, someone have to remove the shoes before entering home, etc. In France, it is yeah, common that the number 13 is not used because of bad luck, and hereby it is okay to open gifts when received. In Korea, it is not allowed to wrap gifts in the colors of green, white, or black paper. And for example, while eating or in start to eat, the eldest or senior person has or should eat first. And in meetings, for example, in business, the person of a lower status should bow the person of higher status first. So, all in all, the cultural dimensions and values show that yeah, different nations have different cultures, and in business, it is also difficult to arrange everything that everything goes well, because when, for example, you make business between French and Chinese people, or German and Chinese, there are, yeah, of course, obviously differences, and you have to care about these cultural aspects to, yeah, be successful in partnerships, for example. Yeah, thank you for listening the presentation. At last, you can see here the references. I'll show you for a few seconds that you can see, as well as here, the second slide. Yeah, thank you for listening. I will also send you the presentation via mail. Bye.